What's up, everybody, and welcome in. This is FST, Fantasy Sports Today. My name's Matt Striker. His name is Joe Pisapia, and this is the place for those that want to dominate. Whether it be season-long, DFS, straight-up wagering, whatever it is, we've got you covered. Quick reminder, at SportsGrid, at SportsGrid TV, those are our social media handles. If you're new or you're lapsed, there's a lot of information you're going to want to keep in your pocket with you. Keeping your things in your pocket reminds me to bring in my man, Joey P, because I have, you get your head out of the gutter. I have the Fantasy Black Book in my back pocket. And if you don't know what it is, during the next commercial break, do yourself a favor and check it out. The guy that put it all together, Joey P, Joe Pisapia, he's here each and every week. We're talking baseball, Joey P. I can't think of a better person to do it with than you. What's up, my man?
I'm just trying to dig myself out of that pocket hole that you put us in to start the show. That's what I'm trying to do. Oh, wow. That was small. Golf claps up for that one. Good morning, Matt Striker. It's a beautiful day to talk about baseball, and we've got a phenomenal show for you today. We're talking about starting pitchers. We're talking about the Central of the American League. We continue with our team previews, so we're going to get you all up to date before all of your baseball drafts are going on. And a lot of people have already done some drafts. I don't know why, because we've still got plenty of baseball left to go in spring training. Too much baseball. Spring training goes on far too long. It's always 1 week too long. We don't need it. Plus, we've already got real games happening next week, which don't get me started on that. It's fun. It's cool. It's annoying if you run a fantasy league.
I think I have to get you started. I have to get you started. It's a great way to open the show. I think you might be right here.
You're not a commissioner, right? In any league.
I have two kids. And you think I'm going to be stupid and be a father to 11 other morons out in the world? No way.
Well, look, that's a good way of putting it. It's very accurate. But I'm a commissioner, and I also have two children. They're teenagers now. And I can tell you this. It's a pain because as a commissioner, you're trying to figure out, do I count these games? Do I not count these games? Well, we haven't had the draft yet. So people might try to take some of these players randomly who had like a good game there just to get ahead in that first week. It's a mess. I hate it. And speaking of messes, let's talk about Gerrit Cole's elbow. Well, last we left you on Sunday, we told you things were not going in a good direction. Whenever you get a second opinion on a Tommy John situation, you know what the second opinion is? Same as the first. It's always the same thing. And we immediately told you to bet on the Boston Red Sox because why? We like their rotation. We like their offense. We like the youth that's coming through there. The Christian Campbells, the Roman Anthony's, all these guys, right, had big days yesterday. The Yankees are in a bad spot. They lost Juan Soto already this offseason, and now they're going to lose Gerrit Cole for the rest of the 2025 season and a good chunk of 2026, most likely too. So this was a foregone conclusion. By the way, that number on the Red Sox went from plus 350 to plus 270. So, yeah, there was some real value there. This is why you watch the program. But we got to start here because Luis Gil is going to miss significant time. Gerrit Cole, again, I told you last year I was so concerned about Gerrit Cole's elbow. I told you, even though, the stats were pretty much there, he did not look comfortable to me at all. This is the least surprising thing of the 2025 baseball season so far. It's who benefits the most now in fantasy. Clark Schmidt comes to mind because we know he's going to have that rotation spot. So you're going to have Clark Schmidt, you're going to have Rodon, you're going to have the newly acquired Max Fried in this rotation. Marcus Stroman finds himself back in this rotation, much to the chagrin of Yankee fans everywhere. And then Will Warren, who's had a pretty good spring. Matt, what do you make of Will Warren, at least early on, being the stopgap in that fifth spot for the Yankees?
Well, that's the hope. Right. And if you're out there right now and you're looking for some type of draft help much later on, you can take a flyer. In those late rounds, you can have a lot of fun with pitching. Joe and I were talking about before the show, and there really is a lot of value if you go past some of these big name pitchers. We'll talk more about it on the air in a little bit. So I think that is an interesting case. I think that the Yankees are never out of question for making a deal. And there also is something in the farm system that could come out. But right now, it's really rough. And if those of you have drafted already and you're a Gerrit Cole manager, what do you do, Joe?
That's the problem. The keeper leagues, the dynasty leagues, you're kind of stuck here. And I know a lot of people who have them at very high cost in some of those leagues too, which is really frustrating because you made an investment in the salary cap drafting Gerrit Cole, thinking he's an ace, thinking he was past everything, and he wasn't. And again, this was inevitable. When guys have elbow issues, it's just going to eventually come to Tommy John surgery. The timing of it is more frustrating. I think at the end of the year, had he said, look, I'm really just not right. Let's get this all done. And if he had got in November, then guess what? By 2026, he'd probably be in a better spot. We'd be ready to start the season with him. But we're not going to be in that situation with Garrett Cole for a while. That is, I think, what's more frustrating. So at this point, the Yankees already getting off to a bad start. Not what you wanted to see as a Yankee fan, especially coming off that World Series loss. Gunnar Henderson, good news, though, in the same division for the Orioles. He is on his way back. He had a, stop me if you heard this before, an oblique issue. I know they're so uncommon. They're so rare nowadays in spring training. I mean, you never see these, Matt. It's so bizarre. But the good news is Gunnar Henderson working his way back. Bobby Witt got hit on the hand earlier this week, but x-rays were negative. He was tweeting. I don't know if you saw this social media clip. He was tweeting that he was okay, and Vinny Pasquantino took a picture of him as he was tweeting saying, look, he's okay because he's using his left hand to tweet. I thought that was very funny.
Sure, no, listen, there's that's funny. The camaraderie is there, but when you say that Witt gets hit on the hand and everyone takes that collective, I think that speaks a bit more to the Royals as a whole, and we can talk about this more later. That look, either you believe in this team because of Bobby Witt, but without Bobby Witt, do you still believe in this team? And I think we can look at that from a wagering perspective, from a fantasy perspective, and definitely from a DFS perspective. Joe?
Yeah, look, I think what we're starting to believe in is maybe the upside of Jack Caglione, who's having just an incredible spring training. And we're talking about more about him, I think, later in the show. But Jack Caglione last year was a draft pick, in case you're somebody who doesn't, play in a lot of dynasty leagues or pay much attention to the college baseball scene. Caglione, just an unbelievable talent, a hitter and a pitcher too, but he is just going to be a hitter and already just crushing spring training pitching. Stats so far this year, he's got an 1854 OPS. He's 9 for 17 with 3 homers, 3 doubles, 3 strikeouts, and 4 walks. Now that's pretty good. I'm telling you, at some point in 2025, you're going to see Jack Caglione on this major league roster. I think that's a foregone conclusion. And for the Royals, that's what you want. You want these kids to come in halfway through the season, make an impact, instead of dealing kids to bring in other players to make an impact. That's how you sustain winning in a market like Kansas City. Another guy that I think is turning heads this spring is Ben Joyce, who is a relief pitcher for the Los Angeles Angels of Anaheim. Now, he is not the closer on the depth chart, but instead, Ben Joyce, well, maybe yet, because Kenley Jansen has that gig for now, because Kenley Jansen was brought in as that veteran presence, but there's a good chance at some point, some team's going to be looking for some help in a bullpen, and that veteran Kenley Jansen could be that guy. Now, Ben Joyce, on the other hand, a guy with incredible velocity. We're talking 103, 104, 105. And it's coming out of the bullpen, and that is going to be really tough to hit. So far this spring, this guy has been lighting up the radar gun, and I think a lot of people are looking at Major League Baseball and saying, okay, this guy has an opportunity to be a very special closer if he can harness all of that velocity and find a little bit of the pitchability, as they like to throw that word around nowadays. I hate that word. It's stupid. It's the dumbest word since stuff. That's what I think, man. But Ben Joyce, I want to talk about Ben Joyce because I want to throw a team on this. Ben Joyce is a player that I think a lot of fantasy managers should be looking at, even if he doesn't have the closer job, because he can give you strikeouts. He can give you whip. He can give you holds. He can potentially give you some good ERA too. And there's that upside that if you draft and stash him with a late pick, at some point, he could also give you saves.
So here's the thing when you mention pitchability and stuff, let's say it's pitch mix, because if he has a fastball that sits 103.5, 104, it makes his changeup and secondary pitches that much more devastating. He needs to harness that. I think that's what you're talking about. When you look at this team, what's that staff? Kikuchi, Soriano, Hendricks, I think Detmers. If anyone falters, Caden Dano waiting in the wings. To get to Joyce is going to be intriguing to see. When do they use him? 7th, 8th inning guy? Fun to watch, Joe.
Yeah, and Kenley Jansen is not young either. He's 37 years old. So we always, I mean, he's young to us, but in baseball years, not as much. But we've got lots of pitching to talk about, lots of pitchability with some of the guys up next. The top targets on the starter board when we return on FST.
The Eagles got it done. If you back them, you're celebrating. Football season may be over, but the action never stops.
Are you ready for some baseball?
At SportsGrid, we're always in the game. We bring you 24/7 betting insights, expert picks, and real-time analysis. Next big play is already in motion. Are you ready? It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
Anyone that's been to a sporting event, the atmosphere before a game, I think Game Time Decisions has that same exact atmosphere. This is our arena. This is what we do. There is going to be an energy to Game Time Decisions that you will feel night in and night out. The excitement you get when you lock your bets in, when you're figuring out what you want to do, we can zone in on the biggest games each night. I want this to be the place that people come to before the games start so they feel as ready as possible to lock in their cards. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions to get that new information, react to it, and be able to then bet accordingly. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
The two guys that can do it all.
Too much electricity this morning.
This is a good time. We're having a lot of fun.
I had to do a triple take.
Ka-ching!
Why? Because of parity.
I didn't mean to offend.
Yeah, it's not going to happen.
Load management is a dirty word.
Let him rip.
You know what? Circumstances provide the results. What?
How do you do this once?
Oh, Donnie, you got such a good show there.
A network that is booming.
The Early Line, only on SportsGrid.
All right, welcome back into FSD Fantasy Sports today. Matt Striker and Joe Pisapia with you here, talking everything you need in order to dominate with regards to baseball. Joey P., the author of the Fantasy Black Book, along with Matt Striker here. Want to shout out AJ behind the glass, and welcome back TD Jake, a different kind of team here. So we're going to play hard and we're going to win this thing. We're talking starting pitching targets. Now pay attention here, because Joe, you were schooling myself and the crew before we came on the air with regards to, if you want to reach for some of these names, God bless you, go right ahead. But if you don't, you're going to think about what comes later on. And you have some interesting advice about that. So let's talk guys like Tarek Skubal and Paul Skeens and Wheeler and Gilbert to a lesser extent. But talk about the starting pitcher target and how to approach it in drafts.
Yeah, look, starting pitching is always going to be the most volatile of all your investments, even the good ones. It's just going to be the case. Now, what format you're playing in really matters the most of how you value pitching. If you're in head-to-head points leagues and wins are worth 10 and strikeouts are worth 2, well, guess what? The starting pitching should go early and often in your draft. You should be looking at those guys, especially if you're playing week-to-week head-to-head formats there. That makes the most sense. Even head-to-head categories, I understand wanting that dominant ace pitcher to have maybe in the second round. I kind of get that. But if you're in a season-long roto, I struggle to see the investment of a first-round pitcher. I don't have a first-round grade on any of the pitchers. You've seen Skeens and Skubal kind of, sneak their way into first round sometimes in drafts. I disagree with that. And it's really because of the logic of the offense that you're going to miss out on. I feel like the offensive players there, the elite ones, there's about 25 of them or so, and I want to get as many of them as I can. Then after that, there's plenty of pitchers that I think have number one upside or the ability to have number one style starts more often than not. And that's more what I'm looking for. So it's not a knock on any of these guys, but you're not going to find a lot of these players on my personal rosters and my builds because they're not the Randy Johnson striking 300 guys out or the Pedro Martinez. Like, those guys don't exist anymore in Major League Baseball. It's just not there. And what is there is a bunch of really good young talent with a lot of questions about durability. And Tarek Skubal was one of these guys last year who had a full season. That was the only question hanging us up on Tarek Skubal. And now he's coming off a year where he had a full season and playoffs. So what does Tarek Skubal look like this year? And I'm sure he looks like a Cy Young candidate, but there's still that little bit of doubt. The bigger doubt that I have is when you start to look at the ADP of Tarek Skubal, right? He is going currently as the 16th player overall. So you have to start to manage the expense of, do I want Yordan Alvarez, Jackson Churio, Julio Rodriguez, or a Vlad Guerrero Jr. even, or do I want Tariq Skubal? And I got to tell you, I think I'm leaning towards the offensive player every single time.
Yeah.
Maybe Skubal over Churio, in the second round. I can understand that if I really like my first round talent hitter. But Matt, it is difficult. Paul Skeens, also a guy going even higher in some drafts. I've seen him go as high as 12. Now, when you're going as high as 12 in a draft, you're talking about trying to draft him over guys like Francisco Lindor, guys like Corbin Carroll, Fernando Tatis Jr., and Vladdy as well. So for me, I'm looking at those bats over these arms. As tempting as Paul Skeens and Tariq Skubal are, they're not tempting enough for me to pivot off the offense early, because I feel like starting pitching is something I can find a little later. There's a lot more of it in the supply and demand chain. And there's always off the waiver wire guys every year. Shawn Manaea off the waiver wire last year, right? Luis Severino on that same team, even off the waiver wire. There's guys that are going to show up there and give you some solid innings and some solid performances. Matt, where do you stand at the top of the pitching board with these two aces?
Well, lead with your head and not with your heart. And Joe said it best. First thing before anything, much I love Paul Skeens as much as the next guy. And so look at your league. How's it scored? Based off that, value the players. And most leagues will give you projected points, and I don't like to go by projections, but at the end of the day, if you look at the projected points and you see that all these batters have far more projected points than these pitchers, then the pitchers have less value in that particular league. But let's have the conversation in a league where everything is equal, right? You want to chase the strikeouts, you want to chase the wins. With Tariq Skubal, where's that bullpen, where's the win going to come from? Do you believe in the team? Those are the things you have to think about. Otherwise, he has to be a horse all year. In a couple of drafts, I really thought about reaching for Paul Skeens. So to Joe's point, depends on what you want and how your team is built. But I don't want to miss out on Vlad Guerrero. I don't want to miss out on Jackson Churio. I don't want to miss out on Anthony Santander. I don't want to miss out on O'Neal Cruz this year. For some reason, I feel like he's ready to go if he's healthy, knock wood. So these are the thoughts I have early on in drafts, Joe.
Well, another pitcher that I feel pretty good about is Zach Wheeler. Now, he is a little cheaper than the rest of them. He's going around the 20th player overall in most drafts. That's closer to Bryce Harper, Jarren Duran, Trey Turner. I feel a little bit more comfortable here with Wheeler. And part of the reason I feel comfortable with Wheeler is I've seen it before, time and time again on repeat, where he has been extremely high end now for a few seasons in a row, whereas you have that one full great season of Skubal, you have a partially great season of Paul Skeens. If I'm going to invest in a pitcher, I'm going to take the guy who's a little cheaper, who's got a little bit more of a track record of holding up for 180 plus innings, because that's the kind of investment I need out of a guy that I'm using second round draft capital. If I can get Zach Wheeler in the third round even, my goodness, that's great. Now, that's typically not happening. He's going somewhere in that late second. But I think late second's okay too, because that wraparound, if pitchers start to go a little bit, then you have an opportunity to come back with another strong offensive player. Logan Gilbert, another one who is going to be a Cy Young contender in 2025. He's going just a hair later than those guys. He's going as the 30th guy off the board. I'm even more apt to do this because Ronald Acuna is in that range, and we know he's going to miss the first 6 weeks, and I can have at least Logan Gilbert's, 8 starts around that time potentially. Austin Riley coming off a weird season, a little up and down, some injury issues there. Rafael Devers also still dealing with shoulder issues. So Logan Gilbert to me there makes a lot more sense. If I'm going to take one of these aces, Matt, I think I'm more apt to take Wheeler or Logan Gilbert at a cheaper cost as opposed to Skubal or Skeens, whose cost is just kind of through the roof right now. And I don't know where you're at, but to me, that seems like a much better way to start your team.
I agree wholeheartedly, and I think what you'll learn on this show is that you can build the Skeenses, the Skubals of the world much later on. And when we talk about it from a wagering front, it's also kind of the same conversation, because what you're willing to spend on quote-unquote draft capital on a Skubal and Skeens, sometimes you got to look at the prices on the board at the book and see if they match up. Joe?
Now, the sweet spot of starting pitching is right behind some of these guys here, right around that fringe top 10 starting pitchers off the board. You're going into the 40s, the 50s overall. That's where I'm starting to look. And I've got two guys lined up there that I feel really good about that return on investment. Who are they? We'll tell you when we come back on FST with our starting pitching preview for 2025. Rolling on.
The Eagles got it done. If you back them, you're celebrating. Football season may be over, but the action never stops.
Are you ready for some baseball?
At SportsGrid, we're always in the game. We bring you 24/7 betting insights, expert picks, and real-time analysis. Next big play is already in motion. Are you ready? It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
Anyone that's been to a sporting event, the atmosphere before a game, I think Game Time Decisions has that same exact atmosphere. This is our arena. This is what we do. There is going to be an energy to Game Time Decisions that you will feel night in and night out. The excitement you get when you lock your bets in, when you're figuring out what you want to do, we can zone in on the biggest games each night. I want this to be the place that people come to before the games start so they feel as ready as possible to lock in their cards. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions to get that new information, react to it, and be able to then bet accordingly. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
The two guys that can do it all.
Too much electricity this morning.
This is a good time. We're having a lot of fun.
I had to do a triple take.
Ka-ching!
Why? Because of parity.
I didn't mean to offend.
Yeah, it's not going to happen.
Load management is a dirty word.
Let him rip.
You know what? Circumstances provide the results. What?
How do you do this once?
Oh, Donnie, you've got such a good show there.
A network that is booming.
The Early Line, only on SportsGrid.
All right, welcome back into FST Fantasy Sports Today. Matt Striker and Joe Pisapia talking everything baseball, whether it's season-long fantasy, whether it's straight-up wagering, DFS, we've got you covered. We're leaning hard on pitching here. We ended the last segment talking about the fact that if you don't make the jump early on some of the big-name pitchers, what do you do when it gets a little later on in the draft? Well, Joey P., the author of the Fantasy Black Book, has us covered. Joe, you got a couple for us. Where do we start?
Yeah, look, right when we get to around pick 40, the offense starts to change a little bit. You have the aforementioned O'Neal Cruz, you have Kyle Schwarber, Jose Altuve, you have these players that, again, I think have some warts on them. Altuve's age, changing positions. Kyle Schwarber, big power, but strikeout machine, batting average kills you. I think Michael Harris is a little overrated. I can find guys that give me 15-15 later in the draft at a much better cost. Right around there, you get guys from the starting pitcher side, though, that are really intriguing. You get Dylan Cease, you get Cole Reagans as well. Now, Cease is a guy very steady in terms of making every start. Cole Reagans, another one, too, big-time strikeout upside that you really love to see. And I look at Cole Reagans in that division, and I also see a guy that's going to have a ton of strikeouts. We're looking in that 2-something range here, 225, somewhere in that projectability factor. And at the end of the day, because of limitations that might be on a Paul Skeens too, Cole Reagans might end up with more strikeouts, right? But you're getting him 30 picks later. That, to me, is what you're looking at. Okay, I want a big-time strikeout pitcher. I want to find that kind of ace. But Paul Skeens, if I take him, I can't take Lindor. I can't take Vlad. I can't take Fernando Tatis. I can't take those star offensive players. I can still get Reagans a couple rounds later, and Reagans will do the job. So I'm looking at two lefties here specifically. Cole Reagans, one of them, and the other is Blake Snell. Now, I know there's a lot of concerns with Blake Snell being the, inconsistent over the years, and I get that. But last year was sort of a strange situation where he came in, signed late, never really got going, and then the last 12 starts, he was basically the best pitcher in baseball once he was back in his rhythm. And now he finds himself on this juggernaut team with the Dodgers, where the bullpen is so good, the offense is so good. Even in a 6-man rotation, which is what they're kind of taunting us with right now, I still think Blake Snell has a chance to win 20 games. And I know that sounds absurd, but in a 6-man rotation in the Dodgers, I think it's possible. That bullpen is absolutely phenomenal. He's going to get run support. He is going to pitch 6+ innings most of his starts. He's kind of a workhorse guy at this stage of his career. It's a good pitching environment. There's so many things to like about Blake Snell. And the reason why I kind of scoff at the 6-man rotation is because I look at the rest of the guys in this rotation, and my big concern is the health with all of them. So I look at Blake Snell probably having to take the ball every 5th day because, yeah, you could tell me about Tyler Glasnow, who's never thrown 150 innings, Yamamoto, who has a much smaller frame. I mean, forget Clayton Kershaw and some of these other guys too. Justin May working his way back from injury. There's so many questions in this rotation. The one guy that I feel really good about his ROI in the draft is Blake Snell. So these are 2 lefties here. I mentioned Dylan Cease too. To me, this is the sweet spot of building your rotation. Matt, what do you think about these guys? Are you concerned that Blake Snell would kind of suffer a little bit based upon the threat of a 6-man rotation? Because when you make less starts, well, that's less of a chance to be productive.
I get that, and I get that thought process, but I think 2025 going into 2026, you have to have a new way of thinking about baseball, especially when it comes to fantasy, especially when it comes to wagering. So I think we need to start to look at the quality start, which was 6 innings, giving up, 3 runs or less than 3 runs, so on and so forth, to equate that with wins, because that's what good teams are going to do now with good starting pitchers. Guys are going to go 6 and turn it over to a bullpen. We've seen it already, so the trend is there. With regards to Blake Snell, he can do that. Dave Roberts can manage this way, but with Blake Snell from the neck up, he has to want to be there. We've seen disgruntled Blake Snell. We've seen Blake Snell not wanting to be somewhere. The fact he wants to be in LA, already pictures are showing up ahead of the series. He's out with the boys, hanging out and stuff. So I think a happy Blake Snell, a guy that only has to go 6 innings, and you mentioned in a 6-man rotation or in a swing man rotation, guys at this age, they love that. He can strut around. He's got Cy Youngs falling out of his pockets. I think that's a lot of fun.
Look, Roki Sasaki has not thrown a pitch in the major leagues yet.
I agree.
Very talented young guy. I know he's thrown 198 innings in the Japanese league, but that's a different style in terms of when you're taking the ball and the day's rest you have. Yeah. Yamamoto last year only threw 90 innings. Tyler Glasnow's career high is 134. Boys and girls, Blake Snell is your 200-inning guy. You need somebody like that in a rotation. Otherwise, the Dodgers are going to have problems this year. You can have all the star power in the world. If it's not healthy, it's not going to make a difference. Now, one guy that is going to make a difference here is coming up next when we're talking about some of the breakouts. In fact, a lot of these pitchers could make a huge impact on your fantasy rotations this season. So we've lined up some names, so make sure you're ready to take notes because these are the guys who are going to make an impact on those stats when it comes to pitching.
The game is on. The stakes are high. But the action isn't just on the field.
He's rearranging that room. Get it inside!
SportsGrid's in-game live. Your ultimate second screen experience.
A little flyer, couple of
15.5-point live line.
Every prop, every play, every day.
Anything can happen. That's complete chaos.
It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
Anyone that's been to a sporting event, the atmosphere before a game, I think Game Time Decisions has that same exact atmosphere. This is our arena. This is what we do. There is going to be an energy to Game Time Decisions that you will feel night in and night out. The excitement you get when you lock your bets in, when you're figuring out what you want to do, we can zone in on the biggest games each night. I want this to be the place that people come to before the games start so they feel as ready as possible to lock in their cards. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions to get that new information, react to it, and be able to then bet accordingly. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
The 2 guys that can do it all.
Too much electricity this morning.
This is a good time. We're having a lot of fun.
I had to do a triple take. Ka-ching! Why? Because of parity.
I didn't mean to offend.
Yeah, it's not going to happen.
Load management is a dirty word.
Let him rip.
You know what? circumstances provide the results.
What? How do you do this one?
Oh, Donnie, you got such a good show there.
A network that is booming.
The Early Line, only on SportsGrid.
All right, welcome back into FST Fantasy Sports today. Matt Striker and Joe Pisapia talking baseball, talking starting pitching, and we can apply these conversations, the information contained therein, to our season-long fantasy, our DFS, and our straight-up wagering. So let's just have these open conversations and create this awareness. We were talking about starting pitching, and we were talking about when you don't want to reach for the Scoobles, the Skeens, the Gilberts of the world. What do? Well, you build up your offense, and then you try to find these guys, starting pitching that will break out. Joe, let's go to Minnesota first. This is a team that always, I feel, is ignored. The entire AL Central is ignored, and we'll get in deeper later on. But it's a great store. It really is. You can go shop at the expensive stores. I'm going to the AL Central, man. What do you want to do?
Yeah, well, it's a lot cheaper to go. It's like Marshall's,
Sure
right? You know, you
Great.
find some stuff for school there. You know, you can find a couple things there. Maybe not the best, but you can find a couple things. The necessities, right? That's what Matt's mom would take you for. Last year, Bailey Ober threw 170 through 178 innings. You look at the ERA, it was close to 4. It was 3.98. But the xERA was 3.22, and that is what I find most encouraging about Bailey Ober when you start to peel back the layers a little bit of this onion. The 8.3% barrel rate looks like he could get hit a little bit hard, but at the same time, a lot of the deeper metrics still really point to Bailey Ober being successful. And the thing I like the most is that strikeout rate. 191 strikeouts in just 178 innings, and the innings total, the fact that he crossed that 175 mark. So this is a guy that you're ready to make an investment in, that I think has number 2 starter potential, but he's being drafted more like a 3 or a 4, depending on the depth of your league. That kind of return on investment is very important. And Bailey Ober, I think, suggests all of that sort of value. If you look overall where Bailey Ober is being drafted, he is going somewhere around the 90th player overall. Just to give you some names around there, Cal Raleigh, okay, catcher with power, that's fine. Mike Trout, interesting, but again, what's that investment look like? Alex Bregman, who is a good player at this stage, but if you're looking to make up some pitching ground, again, this is why I like taking offense early. So I'm not relying on Mike Trout or Alex Bregman to carry my offense. But I think I feel okay about Bailey Ober trying to be a number 3 starter in my rotation. And that is a decision that I've already made this offseason and in most of my drafts and my upcoming drafts. And looking at Bailey Ober as a guy that can be not just be a contributor anymore, but really give you the strikeouts. And as you were saying, if this Twins team can actually stay healthy for a change, right? You actually get full seasons, dare I say, from guys like Buxton and Correa, or at least maybe 100+ games from both of those guys, then all of a sudden the Twins team is a pretty good one. So I would be looking at Bailey Ober as an investment this year. I like the ADP, and I like what I saw last year. I think the numbers don't really give you a full picture of how good he could be in 2025.
Yeah, for those that are new to this, or maybe they're struggling or sometimes just looking for a new metric, something I like to use when it comes to this kind of tier of pitchers. I look at 3 things. Joe talks about offensive ecosystem in his book, so I'm going to look at the offense of the team. I'm going to look at the bullpen of the team as it relates to a started pitcher, especially if I'm going to try to get myself some wins. And look at the walk rate of the pitcher. Joe and I talk about it often, looking at pitchers and looking at hitters. You can look at the walk rate and really tell a lot about a player. So if Bailey Ober checks all these boxes for you, it's not a 1, but if he checks all these boxes for you for that mid-rotation, and like we said, if the Twins excel, this is going to be fun. All the names on this list are going to be fun. Let's go down away from the American League Central. Let's go to the National League Central, a team I'm excited about, but there's questions about the pitching. But I think it all comes together with the coach. I think Terry Francona being in Cincinnati changes absolutely everything. Hunter Green is a guy.
Yeah, we waited a couple of years for Hunter Green, and I think this is it. I think he's ready. He showed you last year that he really took a giant step forward. So I want to call it the full breakout because it wasn't over a full season. It was 150 innings, but he gave you 169 strikeouts, a 2.75 ERA, a 1.02 whip. So can he take that and do it over 30+ starts as opposed to 25 starts? And I think the answer is yes. Strikeout rate is off the chart for him. You're already seeing in spring too, 12.4 strikeout per 9 right now, 16 innings, 22 strikeouts. But the key for him, just 5 walks. He's also cut down on that home run rate. That was the big thing that was always a problem for Hunter Green. You could throw 100 miles an hour in the big leagues, but guys are going to hit it. Right. Yeah, if you're throwing it right down the pipe, that's a problem. So learning that pitch mix, as we talked about earlier, learning, how to find the outs and lineups, how to pitch around certain guys, how to attack others. Hunter Green is starting to understand what it takes to be a big league pitcher. And if you miss out on Cole Reagans, right, at pick 40, right around pick 90 in the same area, right around 92 is where he's going, very close to Bailey Ober. He has big-time strikeout potential, too, and he could give you as many as Cole Reagans, maybe as many as Paul Skeens, too. I'm just saying, but he is going far later in drafts. Now, does he have the consistency yet? No, but I think last year was a huge step in the right direction. Spring training doesn't mean too much except for the guys it means everything for, and Hunter Green is a guy that right now is showing you all the good work that he put in at the end of last year is carrying over into the beginning of this season, and that is very encouraging. And I think you're right. Terry Francona, I think, makes a huge difference in terms of the knowledge he brings to this game, and hopefully his new staff as well. I think that's going to be really important, that veteran leadership to a very young team, and Hunter Green, I think, is a player that could be an enormous breakout in 2025.
And on top of all that, the Reds are just going to be a fun team. You want to be a part of them. I don't know about you, but playing in fantasy and wagering and stuff. I want to be on these fun teams. Another fun team in the Central is going to be the Chicago Cubs. And you and I often talk about how a team really needs 3 big bats and 3 big pitchers. Well, I think they have it if Assad can stay healthy. But Imanaga and Justin Steele are where it's at in the Windy City, Joe.
Yeah, Justin Steele is going at pick 122 right now. And the only thing that's really held Justin Steele back have been injuries, but none of them have been arm-related. It was like a knee issue, then a hamstring problem. There were all these kind of weird situations. He was going to field a ball off the mound, and he pulled a hamstring, and that had him miss some time last year. 134 innings last year, had 135 strikeouts, a 3.07 ERA, a 1.10 whip. Now, extrapolation is a little dangerous, but he's a 29-year-old pitcher, right in his prime. He is a pitcher that has shown you that he has ace-like ability. It's just a matter of, can he give you 30 starts? And considering none of these issues are arm-related that he's had, I'm very encouraged to take this value. I also think the Cubs are all in this year. You saw the Kyle Tucker move this offseason. You see they go out there and they acquire Ryan Presley to be a closer. They have Matt Shaw coming too. I think the Cubs realize that there's a weakness in this division now that the Cardinals have taken a giant step backwards this year. And you look around and say, the Brewers, can they be the same without Willy Adames? I don't know. But I think the Cubs smell blood in the water. The Reds are fun, but inexperienced. The Pirates can pitch, but they can't hit. If you're the Cubs, with Imanaga and Justin Steele at the top of this lineup, and Imanaga going so far ahead of Justin Steele, that I just don't understand. Steele is a great value. Another guy being taken as a 3 or a 4 who's going to give you number 1 type starts probably a third of the time, and that is extremely valuable.
I agree wholeheartedly. If you grab Imanaga and Steele in any way and it matches up, now you have a 1 and a 2 going against the team's 4 and 5. You're going to win that every time. With the time that we have left, let's talk about 2 more. We'll go to the American League, Seattle, Great Pitchers Park. Let's talk about Brian Wu.
Yeah, Brian Wu also having a really good spring. Also last year, I think, showed you that he could be like that next Bryce Miller guy in this rotation. And my God, the Seattle farm system just keeps bringing these guys every single year. And Brian Wu was another one, 121 innings last year at the big league level, 22 starts, a 2.89 ERA, a 0.90 whip. If you're looking for somebody to help with those ratios, I give you Brian Wu. And you want to talk about fun? What's more fun to say woo every time he goes out there and makes a start? And he's also got strikeout potential. It's not quite 9K per 9 where you want him to be, but still in a really good situation. And then there's Jared Jones, who started off hotter than any other pitcher last year. We were talking about Jared Jones going, my God, forget Skeens. Who's this guy? Came out of nowhere, I feel like, last year. Dominated in April and May. Then we had injuries, and unfortunately, the rest of the season was kind of a wash. But he's been experimenting over the offseason. So far, everything looks healthy, but it looks like he's bringing some new pitches here, too. I saw it with Nick Pollock, who was the man over a pitcher list, and he was going on and on about Jared Jones and the adjustments that he's made in the offseason and what that could mean in 2025. So all of a sudden, Jared Jones looks like he could be back to being that dominant guy. And because of the bad finish, that left a sour taste in a lot of managers' mouths. Guess what? The ADP is showing it. He is a tremendous value. We come back. We're going to continue on talking about pitchers, guys who are underrated when we come back.
The game is on. The stakes are high. But the action isn't just on the field.
He's rearranging that roof. Get it inside!
SportsGrid's in-game live. Your ultimate second screen experience.
A little flyer, couple of thoughts.
15.5-point live line.
Every prop, every play, every day.
Anything can happen. That's complete chaos.
It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
Anyone that's been to a sporting event, the atmosphere before a game, I think Game Time Decisions has that same exact atmosphere. This is our arena. This is what we do. There is going to be an energy to Game Time Decisions that you will feel night in and night out. The excitement you get when you lock your bets in, when you're figuring out what you want to do, we can zone in on the biggest games each night. I want this to be the place that people come to before the games start so they feel as ready as possible to lock in their cards. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions to get that new information, react to it, and be able to then bet accordingly. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
The two guys that can do it all.
Too much electricity this morning.
This is a good time. We're having a lot of fun.
I had to do a triple take. Ka-ching! Why? Because of parity.
I didn't mean to offend.
Yeah, it's not going to happen.
Load management is a dirty word.
Let him rip.
You know what? Circumstances provide the results. What? How do you do this once? Oh, Donnie, you got such a good show there.
A network that is booming.
The Early Line, only on SportsGrid.
All right, welcome back into FST Fantasy Sports today. Matt Striker and Joe Pisapia giving you level-headed, entertaining information. I think that we'd have to figure out. We have to get some kind of company in here to abbreviate that. But I think that's what this is. It's clear thinking in a good way when it comes to season-long fantasy, DFS, wagering, whatever it is. Like right now we're going to start the segment, FST Underrated Starting Pitchers. And we're going to go with this first name, and to me, underrated. But I think it speaks to the fact that there's this recency bias and everyone is so easily and quickly to forget. We're going to talk about Pablo Lopez. We're going to talk about Pablo Lopez as an underrated starting pitcher. But I don't know about you. Maybe I'm an old guy. But if I come around on a draft and I need some pitching and Pablo Lopez is standing there, each and every time I want to hang out with Pablo Lopez. I'm going to have a good time with Pablo Lopez.
Well, that's fine. But Pablo Lopez is being drafted around the 70th guy off the board. And I think it's kind of crazy. Another guy that I think is a fantasy ace. Now, people are a little frustrated with Pablo Lopez because last year, and we even talked about it in season last year, the ERA was high. And it wasn't his fault. We kept saying it's not his fault. It's the team around him. That's what's going on here. Buy low on Pablo Lopez. I can't remember how many buy low segments we did on Pablo Lopez last year. And hopefully you did. But the point we're making is the ERA does not match the rest of the deeper numbers. ERA was 4.08 last year. The xERA was 3.67. The FIP was 3.65. And the xFIP, was 3.36. So that's the fielder independent pitching numbers, right? So basically everything's screaming that Pablo Lopez should have had an ERA closer to 3.3. And if he did, I think we'd be looking at Pablo Lopez probably as a top 30 overall player. But instead, we're talking about him in the late 60s, and I think that's kind of crazy. He is 1 year removed in 2023 from having 234 strikeouts in 194 innings last year, 198 strikeouts in 185 innings. I don't get it. Matt, this is still an ace, yet he's going as the 70th player in NFBC drafts. I don't understand it. He is my argument for the entire cause of why am I taking Tariq Skubal in the 9th overall pick or 10th overall pick, and that's instead I'm looking at Pablo Lopez going, all right, I can get basically that guy, but 60, 70 picks later. It's just kind of crazy to me. So Pablo Lopez, number one on my list. But why do you think Pablo Lopez is being so, I think, underappreciated this year?
So while you were talking, I kind of went off in one of those Zen moments, as I tend to do. And here's what I think. I think that either A, not enough people have a working knowledge of pitching so that they can only get the brand name stuff because they might not know who's Hunter Brown. Schwellenbach, how do I pronounce that? Who do I say it? Smith Schwaber, who's that? Because pitching is deep. And hitting is a bit more fun. Pitching is a bit more thinking to the average wagerer and the average fantasy player. So maybe there's that. But then there is also the fact that there are just so many shiny new toys coming out each and every season, each and every year that, again, you make fun of it. Your mother took you to Marshall's. My mother took me to Filene's Basement because that same item 2 years ago was $90. Just because it's 2 years removed and there's a new item out now that's $180, this item is now $45. It's still a $90 item. It's called value. I'm trying to teach it to my two little kids. Pablo Lopez has value. So is this next pitcher on the board, Joe, and I'm going to let you talk about him because he's a former Met. And I think that there's something called a Met stink because, look, you leave a place like the Mets and you go to a place like Kansas City where the rest of the baseball world really has no idea what you're doing. Talk about this particular Royals pitcher.
Look, do I think there's regression in Seth Lugo? Probably. And if you recall, last year in the Fantasy Baseball Black Book, this was my big breakout pitcher investment of 2025. And people were like, Seth Lugo, really? I said, look, if he can go ahead and continue what he did in San Diego last year with the Kansas City Royals, he's going to have a phenomenal breakout season. He's going to be a guy that wins you drafts. I think he was going somewhere around like 200 in ADP or at 170. It was absurd wherever he was. It was so late in drafts where it didn't cost you anything to be wrong on Seth Lugo. And guess what? It doesn't cost you anything now because he's at 148. 148 overall for a guy who was challenging for a Cy Young. So, yes, if I'm going to be fair, Pablo Lopez, xFIP, xERA, were all better than his ERA. Seth Lugo, his xFIP was higher, his FIP was higher, and his xFIP was higher. But none of which were at 4. We're talking about 375 or 325 and 383. All tenable numbers, right? We know that at the beginning of the year, Seth Lugo wasn't striking out a lot of guys, but that changed after the first 6 starts of the season. And Seth Lugo started striking out guys. Look, I'm not saying Seth Lugo is Pablo Lopez. I'm not saying he's even Justin Steele. I'm saying is he is going far too late in drafts right now, considering what he gave you last year. And I think it's important to not discard or discount the 33 starts and the 200 innings. And that's another thing I know people are concerned. Well, he threw 200 innings. But he doesn't have the same miles on him. He was a relief pitcher for most of his tenure with the Mets, a spot starter at best at times. He got his opportunity with the Padres. We've seen what the Padres have done. They got the best out of Dylan Cease. Look what they got out of Michael King last year. So look, Seth Lugo was turned around. His career was turned around. To me, I know he's 35 years old. I know it was too good to be true last year, but the ADP is too good not to buy in again in 2025.
All right, let's quickly move through the remainder of this list. I think this next guy just suffers of people going, who? I don't think they know enough about the Astros pitching staff now that a lot of the big names are gone. Let's talk about this name, Joe.
Well, we talked about Hunter Brown a couple weeks ago on the show. He was our deep dive, right? Remember, we did Hunter Brown the first month of April had an ERA over 10. After that, he had an ERA. The rest of his starts at 2.85. So what more do I have to sell you on, folks? Hunter Brown is good. He had a terrible April. He made adjustments. He fixed it. He is going to be a starter you need to be investing in 2025. I'm sorry. There's just extreme value here. This team is still pretty good. And if Cam Smith comes along quickly and fills that third base spot, he's going to really help that offense. And then the other guy is Spencer Schwellenbach, another player that, last year came up and struggled a little bit. And that's okay as long as you figure things out. And I think what you're looking for is Schwellenbach to build on what you saw last year in this Braves rotation. Braves are still a really good team. He threw 123 big league innings last year, 21 starts, struck out 127 guys, a 3.35 ERA, and a 1.04 whip. He's going to give you whip. He's going to give you ERA. He's got good, solid strikeout potential. The win potential is there. So the question is, what does it look like when it gets to 150 big league innings this year? Well, we can cross that threshold when we come to it. As an investment right now, where Schwellenbach is going, once again, at 92, almost the 100th player overall, same range as Hunter Green. Now, Hunter Green's a guy I like more for strikeouts, but if you're looking to lower whip and ERA, Schwellenbach might be the safer guy for that. Probably more win potential as well. We come back, a deep dive on an SP that all the experts are really in.
The game is on. The stakes are high. But the action isn't just on the field.
He's rearranging that roof. Get it inside!
SportsGrid's in-game live. Your ultimate second screen experience.
A little flyer, couple of 15.5-point live line.
Every prop, every play, every day.
Anything can happen. That's complete chaos.
It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
Anyone that's been to a sporting event, the atmosphere before a game, I think Game Time Decisions has that same exact atmosphere. This is our arena. This is what we do. There is going to be an energy to Game Time Decisions that you will feel night in and night out. The excitement you get when you lock your bets in, when you're figuring out what you want to do, we can zone in on the biggest games each night. I want this to be the place that people come to before the games start so they feel as ready as possible to lock in their cards. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions to get that new information, react to it, and be able to then bet accordingly. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
The two guys that can do it all.
Too much electricity this morning.
This is a good time. We're having a lot of fun.
I had to do a triple take.
Ka-ching!
Why? Because of parity.
I didn't mean to offend.
Yeah, it's not going to happen.
Load management is a dirty word.
Let him rip.
You know what? Circumstances provide the results. What? How do you do this one? Oh, Donnie, you've got such a good show there.
A network that is booming.
The Early Line, only on SportsGrid.
Welcome back into FST Fantasy Sports. Today we're having a good time here. We hope you are as well. Stick around. Every single show is like this and probably even a bit more better and professional. But the information and the entertainment that you get is what's important. It helps you win money. I mean, Joe, we talk about it all the time. Everyone I know has some type of revolving account, a Netflix or something. Dude, if you watch baseball and you like baseball, why not throw something on it with all the apps out there if it's legal in your state and be able to pay your Netflix bill, your grocery bill, whatever other. Some people have habits and they spend hundreds of dollars a month on those habits. Why not be able to subsidize it with your love of sports? Let's take a deep dive onto a Cleveland Guardians pitcher that has high K potential. And what I love about the Guardians overall is the path to wins is there. I mean, you honestly only have to pitch 6 2/3 and turn it over to that bullpen. Let's talk about this pitcher. Let's take a deep dive into this Guardians starter.
Yeah, you mentioned the bullpen. The bullpen is incredible. We'll talk more about that. Was it 5 pitchers under a 2 ERA last year? That's pretty good. I think it's the first time in Major League Baseball that's ever happened where you had the threshold of innings for a reliever, and they had 5 guys under an ERA of 2. But Gavin Williams is the starting pitcher we're talking about. He's going an ADP, get this, consensus ADP of 233 overall. So look at the spring numbers so far. Yeah, well, but we do, and now you do, and now everybody watching this show does. So 8 innings so far this spring, a 1.13 ERA, 6 strikeouts, 2 walks, 0.88 whip. Now, I'm not getting super excited about spring necessarily, but this is the pitcher that we saw in the minor leagues. Again, continuing the deep dive of Gavin Williams, when you start to look at what he did in the minor leagues, 192 minor league innings, that ERA was 2.34, right? The whip was at 1.00. This is a dominant pitcher in the minor leagues. And if you want to talk about dominance, let's look at the hits allowed too, because that's always a big one too. You know, are guys making contact with this guy? No, they're not. 192 innings, 122 hits. Okay. This guy's filthy. And I think he just struggled a little bit at the big leagues last year, but you saw the ERA, people were running away. Oh, 4.86 ERA. Well, the FIP was 3.67, more than a run less. Basically, you're looking at Gavin Williams as a guy that, you know, Saris is in on. We've had him on my show on Fantasy Bros MLB. We've had Nick Pollock on speaking glowingly about Gavin Williams and the value of him. So sure, we're looking for him to build up those major league innings, and that's something that we still have to have a discussion about. But if we're talking about the quality of these innings, And even if he does just, become a 6-inning starter at most, and that's what he is, you mentioned that bullpen. There's still plenty of bridge to that win. So Gavin Williams is in a tremendous spot here where he is nothing but upside in your drafts. And Matt, if you are looking at taking hitting early and you're trying to take shots at pitching, I would be even aggressive, like 2 rounds more on Gavin Williams, just to make sure that I had this potential pitcher on my roster.
Yeah, this is where it's worth it. Like you said, you don't want to miss out on him. And what I've learned here, at least from this first hour, is when we're talking about pitching, looking at walks, we're looking at hits allowed, we're looking at that path to wins. These are the things, overall, when you look at Gavin Williams, you look at his pitch mix, you look at how he sits with this Guardians team and this bullpen. He's a gem just waiting to happen, especially on the wagering side too. When we get good pitching matchups here, because I think he's listed as their 3. I think it was their Bybee, Lively. I think McKenzie's their 5. I'm just doing this off the top of my head. Williams as a 3 matched up against someone is going to be a fun day.
Yeah, a really fun day if you have Gavin Williams. And it is all about the cost, right? So if you draft a guy in the 200s, he doesn't work out, well, you drop him. So what do you have to lose here? But he should not be going in the 200s. And it's funny, Matt, because you think like the NFBC ADP would be a little bit different. It's not. He's at 233. So people are still not ready to quite take that plunge. Just to give you an idea of some of these other guys going along this range. You're talking about, George Springer, who, I don't know, man. Like, I can't get excited about having George Springer on my team right now. Sure. Parker Meadows, some other pitchers we are going to talk about. There's actually a sweet spot of some of these pitchers in hour 2 we're going to discuss where some of these guys post 200 are really intriguing. Gavin Williams is definitely one of them. Ryan Mountcastle, there's another hitter that, like, he's just fine, right? He's not really moving your needle offensively. Right. But Gavin Williams could end up being your 3rd best starter on your team.
I agree. And also another thing that we've learned here for those that are new to all the terminology, when you look at the FIP, fielding independent pitching, you look at the ERA, if there's a huge gap in the number here, that tells you more about the real pitcher. Look for the FIP number more than the ERA, Joe.
Yeah, the FIP at 3.67. Even the xERA, the expected ERA, should have been 4.22. Still a little bit more reasonable. And part of the reason those numbers were inflated because they weren't letting go 6-7 innings, right? It's a little more controlled environment. I think the training wheels come off for Gavin Williams this season, and big things could be in store. Big things coming at you for hour 2. The AL Central previews right around the corner.
The game is on. The stakes are high. But the action isn't just on the field.
He's rearranging that roof. Get it inside!
SportsGrid's in-game live. Your ultimate second screen experience.
A little flyer, couple of 18.5-point live line.
Every prop, every play, every day.
Anything can happen. That's complete chaos.
It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
Anyone that's been to a sporting event, the atmosphere before a game, I think Game Time Decisions has that same exact atmosphere. This is our arena. This is what we do. There is going to be an energy to Game Time Decisions that you will feel night in and night out. The excitement you get when you lock your bets in, when you're figuring out what you want to do, we can zone in on the biggest games each night. I want this to be the place that people come to before the games start so they feel as ready as possible to lock in their cards. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions to get that new information, react to it, and be able to then bet accordingly. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
The 2 guys that can do it all.
Too much electricity this morning.
This is a good time. We're having a lot of fun.
I had to do a triple take. Ka-ching! Why? Because of parity.
I didn't mean to offend.
Yeah, it's not going to happen.
Load management is a dirty word.
Let him rip.
You know what? Circumstances provide the results. What? How do you do this one? Oh, Donnie, you got such a good show there.
A network that is booming.
The early line, only on SportsGrid.